Welcome back to the Bilingualism series of the Instituto Cervantes of Manchester and Leeds. It's a real and a great pleasure to be here again. This is the fourth edition of the Bilingualism series, and it gives me great pleasure to still be part of it as a coordinator, scientific coordinator, and well, presenter of the events. And my name is Julio Villa Garcia from the University of Oviedo in Spain and the University of Manchester, the UK. And today I'll have the honor of introducing not just our speaker, Fraibet Aveledo, but also the series, okay? And I send my greetings to those, not just those online watching us live, but also those who are on YouTube and will watch us asynchronously. So this is, as I said, the fourth edition of the Bilingualism series, which I'm proud to coordinate. It will be available, as usual, on the YouTube channel of the Manchester and Leeds Cervantes Institute channel, okay? This series, this program on bilingualism constitutes a central, essential aspect of the goals, the objectives of the Instituto Cervantes as an institution. Basically, the Instituto Cervantes is all about the promotion of Spanish and other official languages in multilingual environments. So, well, it goes without saying that bilingualism is a central component, is a pivotal aspect of the institution as a whole. And as we know, bilingualism is a subject that has been widely studied in the scientific community for quite a few decades now. Unfortunately, however, disseminating all those results among the lay population, among those who are not experts, is something that still needs work. And our job here is to make a contribution towards that end. I am proud to say that in the last 4 years, in the previous 3 editions of the series, we've managed to debunk many myths surrounding the issue of bilingualism. But first and foremost, the series is centers or is about talking about the benefits that bilingualism has, not just for individuals, but also for society as a whole. And in fact, today we are going to be talking about one of the most important benefits, or one of the most mentioned benefits, which has to do with, for instance, providing presumably a delay in the onset of Alzheimer's disease, right? So today actually we'll be focusing on aging and neurodegeneration in bilingual, and how bilingualism may help with those conditions. Well, aging is not a condition, but we will hear more about it later on. And to this end, we have Dr. Fraibet Aveledo, who is an expert on child language development and bilingualism. In fact, she's a lecturer in child language development and bilingualism at the University of Reading, where she's currently the Director of Teaching and Learning within the department. She's the BA Program Director, in addition to a well-known researcher and I hear a great teacher. Her areas of research include language development, second language acquisition, as well as bilingualism, with special attention to grammar and semantics. Dr. Aveledo is also interested in the relationship to non-linguistic cognition, both in children, and I believe today we'll hear more about adults than about children. As I mentioned, Dr. Aveledo is very well published. She has collaborated with important people in the field, and she actually studied in her native Venezuela. She went to a university under the name is the Jesuit Catholic Andrés Bello University. And some of you may know that Andrés Bello is one of the most famous and most important grammarians in Spanish, okay? Dr. Aveledo also studied at the University of Essex, so we share our alma mater for the master's degree. She worked there under the supervision of Harald Classen, very prestigious psycholinguist. This was back in 2003. And it was in 2014 that she obtained her PhD from the University of Newcastle, or actually Newcastle University in the United Kingdom. She's been, you know, she's worked on languages like English, Spanish, and also Mandarin Chinese. She's been associated with Bangor University, a very famous bilingualism hub. And I think I won't be taking more time. So without further ado, I hope you will join me in welcoming Dr. Aveledo. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and we look forward to your talk and to a very interesting discussion afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Julio. Thank you very much for inviting me and for this wonderful presentation of myself. I'm gonna start by sharing my screen, and also, of course, would like to thank you all for being listening to this presentation. So today, I'm gonna talk about the benefits in the aging population and in the population with neurodegenerative diseases. But let me explain exactly what I'm going to do. So, as Julio was saying before about the myth regarding bilingualism, I want to start my introduction in the same way. It's incredible that 30, 40 years ago, there was still the belief, and maybe in many places still, there is this belief that learning more than one language in childhood could bring confusion, it could be negative for the child. We know that today this is completely false, and not even that, we know that bilingual children are as good in developing their languages as monolinguals, and they even seem to have some advantages. Like, for example, they seem to be more creative, they seem to have a better attentional control. But moving forward from this field on childhood, we know now today that being bilingual, and I use bilingual instead of multilingual, because we got used to say bilingual, I should say multilingual, okay? So it's any person talking more than one language. They present some benefits in the older population, so bilinguals present some benefits in the older population, and it could potentially work as a cognitive reserve, that is, protect the brain from some cognitive decline in the aging population and in this population with neurodegenerative disorders. So in this presentation today, I want to explain what exactly this whole idea means. Not only what are these benefits, okay, there are not many, but they are there, but how they work as a cognitive reserve. So what is cognitive reserve? What is cognitive decline? Okay. For start, I also want to say that this topic is still very controversial. There are many studies that don't show such benefits, and there is still a discussion going on, so you will read still every year different explanations as to why we don't observe such, or as to why the evidence doesn't seem to be uncontroversial. If you want, you can ask questions about it in the question section, but I don't want to dedicate me to that. Okay. So what my points today will be to explain how does bilingualism affect this cognitive decline in this population mentioned above. So what is cognitive decline and what is cognitive reserve? I want to explain and dedicate this lecture to explain in a very simple way, what is cognitive decline? What do we call cognitive decline? What is cognitive reserve? And before that, what is cognition? And how does cognition decline? And what is cognitive reserve and examples of that? Then I will explain how the bilingual mind works. What is happening in the bilingual mind that they have these mentioned benefits? And then I will explain what are the findings, these benefits that has been found, not only in cognition, but also in brain structure. I'm going to say this in a very simple way. I won't get into details into these studies because they are complex, and I just want to bring the final message. I will, if we have time, and I think that we will have it, I will explain a bit more my research on multiple sclerosis, because we have tested the bilingualism, the bilingual benefits hypothesis in multiple sclerosis, a neurodegenerative disease. Okay, so what is cognition and how does it decline? First, I just want to say that cognition is any mental process that happens unconsciously or conscious in relation when we're trying to gain any knowledge or comprehend anything. So every time we think, we experience, perceive information from the outside world, and we think or reason about these experiences, every time that we senses, every time that we are remembering, evaluating, we are using cognitive functions. There are some cognitive functions that are considered high levels, or there's a lower level. But the main idea, and this little graph that you observe here, graph or diagram, show you that memory is a cognitive. So every time we use memory, we use attention, language, visual, spatial perception, again, as we observe here in this, in the text, thinking, remembering, making decisions, solving problems, we are using cognitive functions. So every time, for example, your door breaks and you start to think in which way I can repair it, you're not using language, you are just using, your reasoning and your memory with all the informations that you have about repairment. You are using these cognitive functions. So you can see that mainly we are using cognitive functions in every minute of our life. Examples of cognitive functions, the examples of experiences in the world where we are using cognitive functions. So, for example, when we recognize that what we observe flying is a bird, so we observe it, we perceive, we then contact our long-term memory, we identified that object, and we can explain it. To understand a paragraph, a poem, explaining how something works, finding out how to fix a broken machine. I want to pay attention to some of these cognitive domains because they are the one that has been mainly tested in the area of bilingualism. And these are attention, this one that you observe here in, nude or orange color, and executive functions. These are the functions, these are functions that help us execute any goal. So for example, for you to understand to what I'm saying now, you are in this moment using working memory, you are using attention, you have to focus on what I'm saying, you have to use inhibition, so you have to delete any information, any noise that is coming from the environment and will distract you from understanding this topic. Okay, so the functions that you observe that have arrows are these functions that have been studied mainly in multilingualism speakers. And these ones are executive function. So problem solving, it's this classical, if you have the classical is that you have some holes and some blocks of shapes, and you have to find in which way to put these blocks in these holes. Mental flexibility, shifting, these are all cognitive functions. But these cognitive functions that you can see that are crucial for our understanding and for learning about the world across the lifespan, they decline as normal part of aging. And although we are a more complex cognitive system when we are 55 years of age than when we are 25, and this is because, of course, the experience and the knowledge as we age is important, and we gain on this. Most of our cognitive abilities will decline. That means there will be a gradual loss of cognitive abilities. And this is what it means cognitive decline. Apologies that the slides are maybe before I finish. So the decline in these cognitive abilities has been observed even between 18 to 30 years of age. That is, when you test 30 years old participants in different cognitive abilities and you compare them to 18-year-old participants, there is a difference. 18-year-old participants will have better cognitive abilities. However, the age in which is more prominent this decline is around 60 years of age. And exactly what abilities decline? Well, I have here a list of 6. This list, of course, is not exhaustive, included all the details, okay? There are other factors that I may consider here. But what is frequent is that the speed at which we process any information, and this speed of processing, it gets slower. Our working memory gets less efficient. Our ability to inhibit irrelevant thoughts decreases. Our reasoning ability also decreases. The performance of the long-term memory, this memory where we have all the information, all the knowledge that we have about the world, also the performance of this memory decrease, so we can't access all the information from that memory as good as we used to, or to a storage information also is not as good as it used to. Also, the ability to focus on certain information while suppressing attention to less important information also decreases. And we observe that, if we are with older people around, we will observe that lack of focus, for example, the performance of the long-term memory, also the working memory is quite evident, in older people. Of course, there is a huge variability here, and I want to highlight this. And yes, for some, not everyone, not every individual will have the same type of cognitive decline. There are many factors influencing this effect, and I'm going to talk about it. So this graph that we observe at our right is very good at showing the decline over the years. This is based on a study in the United States. By the way, if you are interested in getting more precise information of where I got these details, of course, you can ask me. This is based on a study that has been going on for more than 50 years regarding cognition, and it has a huge amount of participants. And you can see here that from the 25 years of age, there are some cognitive abilities that start to decline, like the perceptual speed in orange. You can observe that it's a steady and the declination, no? The same happened a bit for the numerical ability. We observe, of course, a stable performance up to around 50-something, and then a decline. However, we observe, for example, abilities related to language, like verbal ability, verbal memory, reasoning, that they remain more stable during the years up to 60, and it's then the late 60s that start declining. And why? This is really interesting. This is interesting, but it is that we are gaining experience constantly as speakers. We are learning all the time new vocabularies, new ways of talking, new ways of to communicate, and this has a potential benefit, which is the experience and knowledge. And of course, you can see that by the 80s, the decline of these abilities is much far behind. Having cognitive declines doesn't mean that you will develop dementia, but some people will develop dementia, such as Alzheimer's. And here I show you some facts. This is in relation to a study done in the United States. So for women that first showed cognitive impairments at around 73 years old, they developed dementia. by 83 years old. That doesn't mean that a person that had cognitive impairment, that had cognitive decline at 73 will develop dementia. So I'm talking here about cognitive impairment. That is serious declines that you can confirm that this patient is out of the norm in the performance of this cognition. And for men, the first experience that when men, let's say in this way, men that show that were diagnosed with dementia at 79, they presented the first cognitive decline or impairments by the year of 70. So it's around 10 years later that they can be diagnosed, properly diagnosed patients with dementia. Other facts are that in this study, for example, they have found that race and education level affect the age of dementia. In the United States, Black and Latin communities of people will present these symptoms of cognitive decline from 3 to 6 years earlier than white people. However, this difference in the cognitive decline seems to be more associated to the access to health care and the accumulated stress over lifetime. But people with higher education seems to be a very important factor in cognitive reserve and maintaining cognition. Is that people with higher education levels tend to experience cognitive decline at a later age. And this seems to be associated to that this population has a much more active mind, they have higher social connections, they also have better access to healthcare and earlier treatment of different medical problems. What is important about this is that if we could find different ways to slow down these cognitive declines, maybe we can also delay the onset of dementias, such as Alzheimer's, which are so prominent in these years. So, some facts. Aging population who have the higher risk of cognitive decline and neurodegenerative diseases is increasing. Of course, we know that we now live longer. This not only brings personal and emotional costs, but also important public costs. So, for example, just in the United States in 2020, the cost of treating dementia was around $305 billion. This includes everything related to dementia. Given these and other related facts, what I just said, it has been a very, in this last decade, there has been a race almost in finding different ways in which cognitive decline could be delayed. That is, which factors could work as cognitive reserve. And here I introduce this concept of cognitive reserve. So bilingualism has been one of these factors on the study in the recent years. So what is cognitive reserve? Cognitive reserve would be any activity that could protect the brain from cognitive decline in healthy aging, but also with the onset of symptoms of dementia. So when we talk about cognitive reserve, we're talking about what can we do to preserve, to delay this the cognitive decline, or preserve our cognitive abilities to the best possible ways. We know from decades ago that lifestyle choices and also, of course, inherited components can affect this the cognitive decline. So, for example, formal education is important. Academic achievement is important. Social activity, physical exercise, intelligence, which we cannot, of course, control, is an inherited component or genetic component. They seem to affect, to help protecting the population. Today, we have all these series of brain training games that are so popular. Border, luminosity, all these applications that are there. These are activities that are supposed to help to maintain your cognitive performance. Although there are still very little research done, yes, it seems that there are some benefits in the older population by doing training games. But bilingualism seems to be also another activity that apparently helps with the cognitive decline. And when we are bilinguals, we are practicing bilinguals all the time. It's not like these games, for example, which we will have a few minutes a day to practice. When we are bilingual, we are practicing our languages the whole time. And I'm going to move to explain this now. So with cognitive reserve, what we would like, and this is a hypothetical, these are hypothetical graphs in which in a typical aging population, we will observe that, of course, the brain structure will age, so our brain will age. That's difficult to change, but also the cognition will decline. And what we would like to see is that the cognitive level, the cognitive cognition remains as we increase age, despite the brain structure decline. Anyway, I'm going to talk at the end of this conference, or this little talk, about some new studies that are showing that bilingualism will have some effects in the brain structure. So how the bilingual mind works. So what we know so far is that when we speak more than one language, these languages are active in our mind. That is, if you see the figure here, so when you say hola, your other words for the same hola, for the same meaning, will be activated. So hi will be activated, bonjour, ni hao, they will activate it. So every time I speak in English, my Spanish is also active, okay? And this can create conflict because if I don't use my executive functions, these cognitive functions that I mentioned before, I won't be able to speak and focus on speaking only on one language. I could have the interference of the other language. But bilinguals rarely make errors of intrusion. But in many cases, for example, you can observe if you are bilingual, you can observe that when you are very tired, when you are distracted, when you are thinking in other aspects in life that in these moments are much more important, you can talk or bring phrases, words by mistake from the other language, which means that you couldn't control the language that you are not talking to, in which you are not talking, and they will come in. That is an example that the languages are active, really active in the mind. So there are plenty of studies that has been done for decades showing that this is the case. Languages are active. So therefore, we as bilingual speakers, we must be doing a task of controlling this language in which we are not intending to talk. And for avoiding this interference, we are using attention, the attention mechanism. Do you remember when we talk about the attention to be one of these important executive functions used or analyzed, in bilingual studies? Okay, this is where the attention is coming from. This activity that the bilingual speaker has to do for not talking in the other language, but only in the one that it's speaking, that is using, is very demanding. And it has happened, and it happens for some bilinguals constantly on a daily basis. For those who are very, there are really high proficient speakers and that have been training in speaking in the two languages for many, many years, and will depend, of course, on your individual characteristics. This activity could be less demanding or more demanding than for others. But for many speakers, and particularly when speakers are learning one language, or they are trying to speak for the first time when they arrive in a country, let's say our students, when they come from Spain to England and they start talking just in English, they have this feeling later, maybe many of you experience it, like you are tired, like my God, I can't anymore, I'm tired. And this is the effect of this, or it's believed that this is the demanding effect of talking in one language when this other language, let's say the more dominant language, is active. So what will happen after using the attention in such a demanding way? This attention mechanism will be enhanced. And this is the idea. So when we measure cognition in bilingualism, most of the studies are showing that it is the attention what is enhanced, what is better in bilinguals than in monolinguals. When other studies have tested other cognitive abilities, like inhibition, for example, working memory, they haven't found differences between monolinguals and bilinguals, but in attention. So what has been the main findings? So there is plenty of studies that show that healthy, middle-aged, and older bilinguals are better in executive function tasks, some in inhibition, but particularly for attention. And therefore, the theory is moving to hypothesize that is attention the mechanism that is enhanced by bilingualism. Not only that, some studies, few studies that are based in analysis of a retrospective epidemiological analysis. They are called, retrospective epidemiological analysis. What this is that for this studies, they have analyzed records from patients, and they have found that those speakers that developed dementia and were bilinguals presented the symptoms of dementia between 4 to 5 years earlier than monolinguals. Of course, these studies are very controversial, and the main issue, the main problem is that they are based in this epidemiological analysis. They are based on records of patients and characteristics of the development of the disease, and they are not experimental studies that are analyzing per se the potential effect of bilingualism. Yes? And we have a study, and we are developing, we are doing more analysis. This is a project still in process, in which we are analyzing by patients with multiple sclerosis who are bilinguals, and we are comparing them to monolinguals. Of course, we have healthy controls in these comparisons, and I'm going to talk about this a bit better in a moment. And they have shown that these bilingual patients had as well better attention. Not only that, in the recent years, there is an increment of studies on brain structures. So what they do, what these researchers do, is to analyze the tracks that work for cognitive abilities, for example, and language, and they analyze what is the word is how thick these structures are in bilinguals compared to monolinguals. So they have analyzed gray matter, white matter as well. You know, gray matter, gray matters are the body, all the bodies of the neurons, and they are the ones that process high-level information, while the white matters are the track, the axons of a neuron, and they just send information. And many of these studies, what they have shown is that when speakers learn an additional language, they restructure this gray and white matter. They look different, and not only they look different, they look thicker. Sorry, that has a special terminology that I forgot it. It will come to me in a moment. Many of these studies have been done by Pleaxikas here in Reading in the Department of Psychology. They are really fantastic. And not only that, this is very recent, they are showing that bilingual speakers, all the area of cognitive function mainly happens in the frontal lobe of the brain. But what they are observing is that in bilinguals, cognitive function seems to be using posterior area of the brain for processing different cognitive activities. Okay, these are the latest one. I've just heard a talk about this in the last days. So these studies are suggesting that the effect of bilingualism could not only be in cognition, it could also affect the brain structure, and this is quite novel. So I want to talk a bit about my study on multiple sclerosis, and I can explain a bit more how do we do these studies, okay? So first, multiple sclerosis is a neurodegenerative disease, is an autoimmune disease. What we observe is that the immune system, so white cells, start to attack the myelin, which is this sheet, this layer. There is a fatty layer that covers the axon. So let me just go from the beginning. So here we have a neuron, okay? The neuron has the body. This is the gray matter, and the axon. The axon is what is called the gray matter. And here we have the dendrites that makes the connection with all the dendrites, and that's the way neurons connect and establish networks. And the axon has this myelin, and in multiple sclerosis, the same immune system start to attack this sheet. This has an impact on the neuron. It can not only damage the nerve, but it can destroy finally the whole neuron. So we know that multiple sclerosis has important implications for motor abilities. No, we recognize it's more frequent to associate multiple sclerosis with motor skills, or the physical movement is impacted. However, this disease also causes disabilities at the neuropsychiatric and cognitive levels. The MS population is extremely heterogeneous, and it's very difficult to study this disease because the areas that are damaging the brain could vary importantly. They don't happen in only one area. But in the area of cognition, multiple sclerosis, the patients with multiple sclerosis present around 43 to 70% of them have reported issues in relation to attention, to shifting, inhibition abilities, and we can observe here the different cognitive abilities in which we observe impairments in this population. And of course, we are saying that being bilinguals can enhance the attention, and attention is one of these cognitive abilities that can be affected. Then a perfect question, research question to make is whether then a patient with multiple sclerosis that is bilingual will have a better attention or a more preserved attention than a patient that is monolingual. So we measure this via a task that is called the flanker task in 20 multiple sclerosis patients, and we compare them with 20 healthy controls. 50 were multilinguals and 50 were monolinguals. And this task, this type of task, like the flanker task, is the typical task that has been used for measuring all these studies that I have reported before on aging population and bilingualism. they do this kind of task. So our aim of our study was to analyze inhibition and attention mechanism in bilinguals and monolinguals with multiple sclerosis. So see that for our study, we not only look at attention, but we also look at inhibition. And we do, I'm not going to get into details, but I want you to get the idea of how these are, how these tests are. And you probably have played with this. So basically, the participant will see, in this case, it's a series of fish. You can see the typical one is with arrows. So they have 5 arrows, and these arrows can be all looking at one side, let's say to the left or to the right. And the one in the middle can be congruent or looking at the same direction as the rest of the fish, or they could be incongruent, as you see it in the second picture diagram. That is, the center fish is looking at the left, while the rest are looking at the right. So the task that the participant has to do, and it's very simple, it's done in a computer, is to select whether the fish in the center is looking right or left. Okay. Of course, they have to do this more than 100 times, and we measure whether they are paying attention, so how accurate they are, and we also can measure whether the distraction that they can get from having the fish looking at the other direction is affecting their responses. So this is the way we can measure these different cognitive abilities. So in our study, we definitely found that bilingual speakers show better attention than monolingual patients. Education, again, was an important factor. So those patients that have higher education presented better attention as well and inhibition. And we didn't find a bilingual advantage for inhibition. So this is the presentation for my study on multiple sclerosis. So just to conclude, today I just wanted to show you what does it mean that bilingualism presents some benefits in the older population. What does it mean that cognition declines? What does it mean that we can preserve cognition? And what really means that we can, bilingualism has an effect in neurodegenerative disorders. This seems a small benefits, but they have really high importance. They have really important implications, because you could see that delaying the onset of dementia for just 5 or 4 years is important. It's a lot of time. And also socially, it's importance of the cost for nations is also will be also the benefit. So thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed this talk. That was me.
Thank you, Fraibet. It's been very, very informative and a lot of things to take in, and very interesting studies. And I'm sure there will be some questions either in the chat or somebody will just raise their hand in order to unmute themselves. But I'm going to break the ice by asking you a couple of things that I don't know. The questions formed in my mind as we went along. I will actually ask you one question, then I will let somebody from the audience unmute themselves, and then I'll ask the other question if there are no more questions, okay? So my question is, how do we distinguish errors of intrusion from code switching? Because I understand there's interference in the sense that, for instance, false friends, right? False cognates. But, you know, if I'm speaking Spanish and suddenly I say something in English, but to me, that might be either a borrowing. If it's more syntactic, it might be code switching. But how can that be told? How can that be distinguished from an error of intrusion in the sense that you were talking about?
Yes, this is why I said the clarification. So intrusion will be that the speaker is intending to say one word in English and a word in Spanish came out. It's different from the habit of producing code switching. So, for example, if there are communities like the Miami community that has been well studied in Bangor, where they normally code switch, and it's incredible, but they do it intentionally. They intentionally think. But for example, I know I personally have many examples of intrusion of the other language just because I am paying attention to different things. Multitasking is terrible.
Oh, I see.
When you are doing different things, and on top of that, I'm talking to you in English. It can words in my other language could come, but it's because it's failing some control systems.
I see. I see.
Yeah. How this is studied is another matter. I really don't know how they, they promote, they analyze this. Yes, that's different, but it happens as an error.
There is a question by Stuart Chadwick in the chat, which I will read verbatim. Question is as follows. Might the difficulty of the second language impact any benefit, for instance, learning another European language compared to an Asian language, for instance?
That's a good question, and yeah, it has been done. As far as I know, I haven't seen a study on this. What is true is that there seems to be more benefits associated when in less experimented, in less proficient speakers. Because in this moment, you are doing much more effort compared to, for example, if you are a simultaneous bilingual that learns languages from childhood. So you are very trained as changing to one language to the other one, so that it doesn't cost, it costs less for you. That seems to be more important than the actual language.
Right. Again, a lot of food for thought, right?
Yes, that's a good question, Stuart. Thank you.
Sarah asks the following question. Does the age at which you learn the second or third language impact the cognitive reserve? For instance, if you learned a language when you're older, when there is already cognitive decline, will that positively affect it?
Sarah,
Is it never too late?
Yes, these are good questions, but the topic is so new that still we are just trying to confirm that there is such cognitive reserve.
Right.
Yet. So there are researchers saying that cognitive benefit doesn't exist, from that bilingual benefit doesn't exist. Yes, I would be lying if I tell you something. What we can definitely say is that learning a language is never late. Recent research, and I know that this is controversial as well, is suggesting that any adult is able to learn the language. Of course, as I explained already, all these abilities will be in decline compared to years, compared to when we are in our 20s. But that doesn't mean that we cannot learn. We will be slower at learning.
Mhm. There is a question which I myself might manage to answer, but we have our speaker here. What's the average age you learn a second or third language for a child to be considered bilingual, multilingual?
Sorry, I think that what is established that there is no. I suppose that what Giovanna wanted to ask is when we can say that a child will have a native-like command in both languages. And usually it is traditionally considered when both languages are learned at the same time, or at least the second language is learned before the 5 years of age. However, this varies a lot. We consider bilingual today any speaker that has a good command that can communicate and interact in the other languages. So independently of whether their accent is still like, it's a strong accent, or if they have grammar errors, because some of these errors will be sometimes impossible to change for some speakers. So some speakers will continue having issues with certain concepts or grammatical structures in the new language. So we can all be bilinguals. Actually, Bialystok says something that I really liked when she said, if you, for example, will have the opportunity to quit your job, go to a country and go to France to learn French, and you won't have anything else to do apart from learning the language. You don't have to worry about anyone in your life apart from learning language. And if people were speaking to you considering the knowledge that you have in that language, you will be able to learn that language as a native speaker. So she said that it's life experiences what is constraining or limiting us to learn a language as a native speaker. I don't know if it is exactly like that, but yes, we all can be bilinguals in a way. I don't know if that responded to your question.
Violante Luján Ortega from the Instituto Cervantes of Manchester comments that from her experience and research on this area with kids, with children, the sooner the better from birth and even before. If parents have different languages, keep the rule of one parent, one language. It's difficult, but certainly not implausible. And I guess that's what is kind of agreed upon in the field, right? That the more inputs, the better the quality and the quantity. Obviously,
Exactly.
the more
Exactly.
success you will achieve, right?
Yes. And we know, of course, that for phonological development, it's important to hear all these sounds early on. So the earlier the child is in contact with the sounds of the language, the easier will be for them to develop these sounds, which are much more difficult in adulthood. So even though I can distinguish between ch and sh, for me, these sounds are not represented in my mind, and I'm still making mistakes every time I'm going to say maybe some words that have sh instead of ch.
Right. Right. Excellent. A lot of food for thought here. And it's impressive that we know so much, and at the same time, much of this enterprise is still in its infancy, right? And there are more questions than answers, but obviously sometimes the questions themselves are very informative, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
So,
and it's new. It's
yeah,
if you think about it, it's a relatively new field.
absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
All right. So,
Yeah.
well, unless there are more questions and unless anybody else unmutes themselves, I think we can actually adjourn the meeting. Oh, there is actually a question from Amelia, the last one. What's the maximum of languages a child should learn in childhood? That's $1 million question.
There are not limits, Amelia. We have seen completely successful cases of children that speak 5 languages, and they are really good at all of them. They could be slower in vocabulary acquisition, but in general, a bilingual or multilingual child shows more or less the same periods of development that any monolingual child. And to give you examples, so you have cases in which parents have decided to talk each the language they speak. Let's say that they speak 2 languages. They are in an environment with where a 3rd language is spoken. Then they move, and a 4th language is then included, and it is completely, it is not confusing for children to expose them to many languages. Actually, it is incredible. I can see your question. No, it's not confusing. Well, I haven't read cases in which children are exposed to, I don't know, 10 languages, but look at what Rocio said. It makes me think of multilingual societies where 4 or 5 languages are acquired, some in the familial environment, some in educational settings. Exactly. And the child has the ability, incredible, from early on to differentiate the different languages. And that has been studied. They know even when they are babies, they know when they are taught in, let's say, French or in Spanish, even though they don't understand all the words or the grammar or whatever, they can understand that these are 2 different languages.
Right. And I may add that if we think about it, potentially maybe the number, I wouldn't say infinite, but we will never know because the child doesn't really have time to be exposed to the 7,000 languages that exist at present, in addition to a few hundred sign languages, right? So we mentioned the quality and the quantity of the inputs. Obviously, if you try to expose the child to 30 languages, that's basically impossible because the child needs to sleep, the child needs to play, right? But we don't know what the brain is capable of. But as Fraibet mentioned at the outset of the answer, it's true that we've seen very successful cases of 4 or 5, and that's exactly what Perez Tatam also added, right? The sky seems to be the limit, but there's a practicality issue in terms of the time you are exposed to the language.
Yes, Julio, and you have said something important, the input. There are studies that try to detect how much input is necessary to learn the language. And yes, if the input is very short, very small, not enough conversation or talking, yes, the language won't be acquired. It won't be learned.
Right. Giovanna asks a further question. What would be your suggestion to a family where a parent speaks a minority language and the other parent speaks the majority language, also spoken in the surrounding environment, in order to promote bilingualism or multilingualism?
Well, I think that, and also Rocio can talk here because Rocio actually works in this area and has a group with parents to promote Spanish and languages. But I think that usually what you observe is that each parent will talk in their language, and successfully the child will learn both languages. So, for example, I'm really impressed. We have a colleague who's he is Turkish. The mother is American, North American. They live here in UK. So it's basically that case, Giovanna, that you're mentioning. So the wife speaks English. English is the environment language and the majority language, and he speaks Turkish. They only visit Turkey once a year, where they can, when this child can have access, to practice more Turkish. And it's amazing. This child speaks Turkish. It's true that maybe she prefers to respond in English, but she understands perfectly Turkish. Of course, there has been a work of the father, and there is a work there. There is a family policy in, of course, help in bring more input of the minority language. So the TV, films, books are done in the minority language because, of course, the child will have less input in this one. So you can choose either way, but sometimes it's more natural for parents to speak their native language if they understand each other.
There is a follow-up by Rocio Perez Tatan that I will read out loud. Studies indicate that acquisition of the minority language within a particular community, for instance, Spanish in the United Kingdom context, is most successful if the minority language is the language at home.
Okay, of course.
And there is actually a related question by Amelia, which is as follows. Would you say it's recommendable to have some rules in order not to mix the languages, for instance, English in society versus Spanish at home?
Well, Amelia, what I understand, the studies I have read show amazingly that despite the mixing, the child will know which language is which. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter to mix it. Wow. It's a fascinating topic, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so I think we've reached the end. And if there are any questions, I'm pretty sure Dr. Aveledo will be happy to answer them via email. If you Google her name, Fraibet Aveledo Reading, you will find her email and she will be happy to answer any questions. I'll also be happy to address any questions as far as I can answer them. And I'm pretty sure Dr. Perez Tatam would be happy as well. So thank you, everyone. It's been a wonderful meeting, very lively debate. Yeah, we have the email there in the chat for those of you watching online. This is f.aveledo at reading.ac.uk, but you can obviously Google it if you're watching us asynchronously, as we hope you will. Thank you, everyone. Thank you in particular to our speaker and to everyone who's asked questions. Thanks to the Instituto Cervantes. And we will be in touch regarding the next event of the series, which will take place on the 22nd of May. So we have a few months to go. A couple of months to go. Easter in the middle. So I wish you all the best. Thank you for your continued support. And thank you again, Fraibet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a great experience to talk to you and we'll respond to all these questions.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias a
Hasta
todos.
pronto.
Hasta luego, feliz noche.
Bye.